All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome our first guest, Edwards Heisler, where he's going to talk about which way forward, Mars exploration, or Trump's Space Force warriors. He was a member of the Mars Society and Planetary Society, former Team Master Union project organizer, former Railroad Union representative in Chicago.
Let me sum up. The Space Force is not the way to go to Mars. Any questions? No. All right. Well, it's becoming clear that the Trump government Space Force, the goals and the military objectives he has in outer space represent a clear danger to all private and NASA plans to engage in peaceful, scientific space exploration. In the 1960s, we had an outer space competition between the former Soviet Union and the United States. In fact, that was a major factor that led to the United States Apollo moon exploration successful program. And we did it in less than a decade. This is not like the 1960s with the Space Force. It's not a contest between the Space Force and other nations in the world to see who can land boots on Mars first. Nothing like that. In fact, his proposed military Space Force is a diversion away from serious scientific Mars exploration by NASA and others. The Space Force will make it more difficult, if not impossible, for NASA to collaborate in the future with the European Space Agency, the Chinese National Space Administration, other nations, and even private businesses like SpaceX to participate in international projects to explore space. And militarizing space with the Space Force, that's the objective, will cost us a lot of money. Roll Call reported that military experts indicated the cost of the Space Force could amount to $500 billion over a decade, $50 billion a year. Hello, what's that? Yeah. Okay. Well, and NASA is going to be competing with the Space Force for money, and guess who's going to win that contest between Space Force and NASA? Could someone go over there, or are we being too loud for them too?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways.
It does?
Because I
Not?
was in that room
Okay.
yesterday with some speakers here.
Okay. Well, let it be. Well, you can check, but you can't tell them to keep quiet because ours is more important. Well, there's now an anti-Mars exploration agenda held by many hardcore promoters of the Space Force. This was clearly explained by a major contributor to Fox News, Douglas McKinnon. He's a former White House and Pentagon official. In May, he wrote an article for Fox News, headline, quote, "Forget about sending humans to Mars. We need a permanent moon base instead." He explained, McKinnon, "We now know that we don't need to worry about Martians sending a fleet of spaceships to attack us." Well, that's a huge relief. So that means we won't have to build a Trump space wall to stop an illegal alien invasion from outer space. And that's going to save us a lot of money. But this McKinnon character, he continues. So sending humans there would do nothing to enhance our national security, going to Mars. Sending humans to Mars at least any time in the next few decades would be a costly mistake. Instead, we need to use our limited resources to return to the moon and set up a permanent base. That would be a military base, of course. McKinnon goes on. It gets worse. President Trump has the opportunity to make America great again in space. But this will only be possible if President Trump does not buy the Mars snake oil that some, including companies standing to make massive profits from manned Mars exploration, the snake oil they are peddling. That was, I thought, obviously an indirect attack on SpaceX and Elon Musk. And I don't believe that our friend Elon Musk is mainly motivated by personal enrichment and greed, personal greed in his quest to go to Mars. And McKinnon, he knows that, but he threw it in there anyway. And McKinnon warns, here's where he gets really paranoid. If the Russians and Chinese could destroy or disable our satellites without fearing we could do the same to them, they could suddenly throw us back into the 1950s and dictate our terms of surrender. Surrender. So would China be marching into Burbank? Will we be waving white flags? Unconditional surrender of the United States? That's, I think, a lot of nonsensical babble and xenophobia. And it's presented as serious political discourse. The Trump government and some of its apologists have been very, very clear on what they want the Space Force to accomplish. Just listen to them. Sometimes they tell the truth. Really. At a White House meeting of the National Space Council, Trump declared, "It's not enough merely to have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. We must control space. Space is ours." I think his desire to dominate and control outer space is limited to our solar system. He hasn't indicated yet any desire to control and dominate the universe, and I'm sure there would be other strong opposition to that from other species in other solar systems. So he hasn't suggested that. But to clarify his Space Force mission and intentions, he declared to assembled Marines in San Diego that space is a war-fighting domain, just like the land, the air, and the sea. Yahoo! Well, I just added the Yahoo. He didn't actually say that, but it would be totally appropriate. And some of his generals chimed in. One told the assembled warriors it was time for us to embrace space superiority with passion and a sense of ownership. Newsflash. The United States, Russia, China go down the list. We do not own, should not own outer space. This one general optimistically added, "I believe we're going to be fighting from space in a matter of years." Wonderful. Another general, the top officer, in fact, of our nuclear weapons, is pushing the Defense Department to go faster, much faster. He loves the way the space warfare plans are moving, and some of the newspaper headlines suggested that, blurred things like, Air Force tries to create a warrior culture in space. Just what we need. And another, the Air Force is grooming space warriors. Now, Any talk about not engaging in outer space wars must stop, according to a former Assistant Secretary of Defense. He said Congress should come to terms with the fact that space wars are inevitable, urging we need to stop talking about trying to prevent war in space. Well, I disagree with him. We need to talk about that a lot more. First, one of the first people up to bat for Trump on the whole space wars idea and space warriors was Monica Crowley, a Fox News contributor. She's also a talk show host. And a few years ago, she registered with the feds as an agent of a foreign government, Ukraine. But unlike Paul Manafort, she did register, so she won't be going to prison. She accused China of conducting decades-long economic aggression against the United States and claimed China was going for global space domination. Trump just proclaimed that as his goal. And she also indicated, well, some of the Trump government representatives are discovering alarming actions in space, not only by China, but even Russia. An Assistant Secretary of State found Russia's launching of a new satellite last October disturbing and troubling, declaring with a straight face, we don't know for certain what it is. And there's no way to verify it. But he added, it was impossible to say that the Russian satellite is a weapon. Impossible to say it's a weapon. Well, why are you suggesting it's a weapon? You don't know. The fact is, one could also say that it's impossible to say U.S. military satellites are or are not weapons. We just don't know. Of course, the Space Force project faces a significant snag in the form of international treaties forbidding the weaponization of space. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 explicitly forbids it. And the treaty declares that outer space is the province of all humankind, that it's a global commons with equal access by everyone for peaceful scientific exploration, kind of like Antarctica today, and that it's not and shouldn't become a military battlefield. There have been a lot of attempts to broaden and strengthen the Outer Space Treaty. Of all of these attempts, the United States government, the UN representative, under both Republican and Democratic administrations, so I'm not just attacking some Republicans, have voted against or abstained without any exceptions. In fact, in 2006, the United Nations voted once again in favor, passed a resolution, in favor of preventing an arms race in outer space. Now, what's wrong with that? Only one country abstained, Israel, and only one country voted against that resolution. Guess who? The United States. There's now open discussion going on in Congress and elsewhere proposing that the United States withdraw from the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, and a withdrawal would not be surprising at all by this administration, considering Trump's withdrawal from the Iranian nuclear deal, restricting Iran's nuclear program, and the Paris Climate Accord. Last April, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the American Space Commerce Free Enterprise Act, which rejected the Outer Space Treaty and clearly stated that outer space shall not be considered a global commons, and the United States obligations under the treaty do not apply to the government nor to private businesses. I think it's become clear that U.S. signatures on treaties, documents, are worthless under this administration. The United States government, the current government, cannot be trusted by any other nations anywhere in the world, including Canada. Why would any nation, including North Korea, a dictatorship, why would they want to sign any agreement with the Trump government on any matter? He trashes agreements. He does not honor them. But Russia, China, and other and the rest of the world aren't just going to sit by idly and watch Trump attempt to dominate and control outer space using his Space Force. There will be a tit-for-tat response by other nations. The drive to weaponize outer space would be on. Now, how would an outer space race started by a Space Force dedicated to achieving U.S. domination of outer space impact our lives and scientific space exploration missions, including the human exploration and settlement of Mars? What kind of dangers would we face? How would it impact international government and private space exploration missions if war breaks out between spacefaring nations in orbit, in space? We have about 2,000 working satellites now from different nations and companies around the world. If a space war breaks out, where you have Russians or Chinese or Indians, whatever, crippling U.S. satellites, and we're crippling their satellites, communications, other satellites, that would quickly lead to an orbital cascade of space debris. It's called the Kessler chain reaction, and you got a little taste of that if you saw the movie Gravity. This would be 1,000 times stronger than that. That in turn, that cascade caused by this little space war in orbit would destroy most weather, communications, and all other satellites we in the world depend upon now in our national and world economy. No cell phones, no TV, no GPS, no internet, all dead. Back to typewriters, but not electric ones, I'm not sure. Okay. The world capitalist economy would be crippled, a world economic depression would quickly develop, the loss of most modern technology would soon follow, and our planet would be circled by millions of fragments from pulverized satellites. It would take decades to clean up that mess. And that would end, I think, human space exploration for decades, if not longer. And Elon Musk, his BFR project, would be dead in the water. That's bad enough. Could there be something worse than that? Yes. How does one prevent an outer space war in orbit around Earth between different spacefaring nations? How do you prevent that war from reaching our planet's surface, from escalating and expanding into an all-out nuclear exchange on our planet? And that would happen, I believe, not only in a matter of maybe a few hours, but perhaps in minutes after the first satellites are destroyed. That worldwide military confrontation between us and other nuclear powers would threaten the very existence of our species and at best result in the collapse of civilization and a return to barbarism. So what can we do? This sounds pretty pessimistic, but there are things we can and should, and I think we will do to stop that. How can we stop that kind of horrible outcome? I believe we can by doing pretty much what the Mars Society and others have been doing for a few decades now. And by promoting unity and action between all those in business, government, private, public organizations who want to protect our planet and explore the cosmos. Unity and action on this issue. And I think we need to defend our friend, Elon Musk. I've been following the media on him for some time now. And a massive character assassination campaign effort is now being waged that began way back in 2016, and it's escalating now. Elon Musk, SpaceX, Tesla, they have a lot of powerful enemies who want to destroy what Musk, his partners, and the workers at his places, what they are building. It's a threat to auto, it's a threat to a lot of big companies and industries, and we must defend him and support him. And he's not insane. He's not at all. He sometimes tweets a few bad things or stupid things and he gets angry, but no big deal. He's not exactly a Trump when it comes to tweeting, and he tells the truth. I think we need to remember what one of our heroes and role models said a few years, well, before he died, obviously, but what he said was so true and applicable today. Sagan wrote, "We've arranged a global civilization in which most crucial elements profoundly depend on science and technology. We have also arranged things so that almost no one understands science and technology. This is a prescription for disaster. We might get away with it for a while, but sooner or later this combustible mixture of ignorance and power is going to blow up in our faces. And we can't let the anti-science morons control our destiny in Congress and in the current federal government. We can't. We've got to fight against that. And like I said, defend people like Elon Musk, who not for personal enrichment wants to see us become a true space-faring planet. So that's it. I've talked probably too long. So if you have any comments or suggestions, please. Yeah, sir.
Hi, my name is Asher. I'm one of those people you could probably describe as a Trump apologist.
Oh, terrible. Well, you didn't charge the podium, so that's good.
Savior moves to the end. So I see the Space Force as having two primary missions. The first is the aggregation of all these space communication systems that the military relies on. Because right now, the Navy, the Army, the Marines, the Air Force all have this kind of redundant space communications, satellite communications organization structure.
Right.
I see that as kind of unifying that. And the second role is just protecting our assets in space. Because right now we do, as you said, $350 billion of economy every year.
Right.
In space, we're all afraid of the Heisler chain reaction.
Right.
We're not doing much to protect that. So you're saying that if we destroy, if the Heisler chain reaction happens, we destroy everything, go back to the dark ages, what's to prevent one of our enemies, like Iran, for example, from doing something malicious to initiate that reaction? We have currently no defense against it. So without the Space Force, how do we defend against malicious actors trying to send us back to the dark ages?
How would other countries defend themselves if the Space Force attacks their satellites? I don't think it's only that U.S. satellites can be attacked in view of our history. And you see, what you've done then, you said, no matter who started the fight, you get a reaction, hopefully not, maybe a massive reaction from the other side, be it some other country or the United States, and that in turn, you need to ban any space weapons by any countries in orbit. You just have to ban that with inspection. Now, right now, we don't know what kind of weapons the United States and other countries have in outer space. Now, we have the traditional surveillance satellites, electronic surveillance, video, et cetera. And this has been going on since the 60s, okay? And everyone kind of accepts that as long as it's not weapons. But the minute you say we're going to put weapons in space, you've triggered something. Russia and China say they will not be the first, and that they haven't. But if Russia or China came out and said, oh no, we're going to send weapons in space, how would we react? How would other countries react? In kind. You just have to stop it and have some kind of way of inspecting it to make sure that the Outer Space Treaty of '67 and any new treaties or agreements are not violated. Because they're just begging for a war then.
I certainly agree with your premise that it's a dangerous
Yes.
to go down. Part of the problem is we just don't know what Trump has in mind. And even if he said he did, we wouldn't know what he has in mind.
Well, he's not sure what he has in mind.
We
So,
can take
yeah.
a little solace in, I think the age of Trump is just about over. Now, who's going to replace him for the next 2 years might be, you can laugh at one. Might be even more dangerous. Gomer. No, I don't think so.
A lot depends on the coming election.
Different way, a different way.
Okay, sir, and back.
I was a captain in the U.S. Space Command. Right now, we have a pretty good organization.
Let them speak.
The Army and the Air Force and the Navy all running around doing their own space stuff. It's all organized right now under U.S. Space Command.
Right.
Right. So there is, now I love the idea of a Space Force if it was under the Department of Transportation and it was to rescue people or whatever. Putting orbital weapon systems up is going to start an arms race like you wouldn't believe. And the easiest thing to do is wipe everything out. The only military completely dependent on satellites is us. So every satellite that can maneuver is right now a weapon. If you maneuver into the path of another satellite, you can take out the ISS pretty easily, just by putting a satellite in orbit. Now, we put up things all the time, the X-37B that goes around and does classified stuff, and that's fine. But then the Russians put up a satellite, and it goes somewhere we don't expect, and all of a sudden we're saying, look how militaristic they're being. Anything we do, they will counter. And the simplest thing for Iran to do would be send a nuke straight up, set it off high enough, and we're all done. And we'll have hardened, everything will be fiber optic after that for about 100 years. To start down, to go down his road requires international cooperation. President Trump is not real big on international cooperation. I used to be a Minuteman II commander, had the keys to launch things. I never thought we would reach a point where the United States would say, we will launch first if it's militarily convenient. When I was a nuclear weapons commander, our policy was that we would not launch nuclear missiles at any other nation unless a nuclear weapon had detonated on American soil. Bush changed that. He said, we will use nuclear weapons if it's militarily necessary. And that's when North Korea started scrambling. And that's when Iran started scrambling. So just that statement, that small policy change, has caused these nations to realize, before, they didn't worry about getting nuked, because we said we wouldn't do it unless they did it first. So if they didn't have nuclear weapons, they didn't have to worry about it. Now they all had to worry about it, and they realized if they didn't have nuclear weapons, they'll have no way to defend themselves. So we can argue politics, but human beings are human beings, they always will be. If we threaten them with this, think China and Russia and Europe can match anything we can put up there and damage us much more severely than we damage them because we are more dependent on those space systems, we're terribly wrong. So I'm not sure what the answer is. It would be nice, you know, if we could intercept anti-satellite missiles and all that, but all they're going to do is develop missiles to try to beat that. Now, before with the Soviet Union, we limited our technology. We did not develop anti-ballistic, we did not develop anti-missile systems. They did, they had the Gorgon system, but it was ridiculous. You're going to set off nuclear weapons over your own country to take out incoming MIRVs. I mean, that's a wonderful policy. We said, you guys can keep that one, we're okay. But then we started worrying about having to shoot down lone actors. Something coming in from North Korea, something coming in from Iran. And it's escalated from there. Then we make China nervous, we make Russia nervous. And they start developing better and better weapons. Russia's already developed this nuclear-powered cruise missile.
Excuse me.
People think, huh? Oh, I'm sorry.
We got. I appreciate your points, but
his idea requires international cooperation, and I don't think we're going to see that out of this administration.
well, I'm sorry. If you have a real quick comment or point, please do it.
Ronald Reagan, before he suffered dementia, played that kind of game. It was an arms race of ideas about something that's technologically not possible, but destroyed the Soviet Union because they couldn't compete. You have to judge politicians by what they do more than what they say. And one of the things that we ought to think about before they establish a military base on the moon is the history of K-SAM and the Ben Phu. Don't create another target for your enemies to destroy you at.
Well, okay. Thank you for everybody.
China is the only nation that I know of to deliberately destroy a satellite in space.
Well, no, we did too. We did the following year. We did it in 2008. Russia did in 2015.
But that's a tip for tat.
Yes, it was.
We didn't do it. I'm completely sure with that.
Okay, we have to really end now.
No, we took out one first. The United States was the first nation to demonstrate anti-satellite weapons.
All right, thank you.
Launched from an F-15.